The congregation rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as Pastor Nicholas entered the grand hall of God's First Son Ministries. The air was filled with excitement and jubilation. It was the church's first anniversary celebration. Junior pastors lined up the altar steps, their well-ironed suits glowing under the bright stage lights. The choir are dressed in immaculate white robes, their voices echoing across the church. The congregation danced to the rhythm, raising their hands and praising the Lord joyfully. Shade, Pastor Nicholas' wife, sat at the far end of the stage, leading the choir with an unmatched energy. Her voice soared above the others, showing her unwavering commitment to the church. She was still singing beautifully when she suddenly lost her voice. Her hands trembled as she clutched the microphone and she kept staring at a point at the end of the church. Mrs. Nicholas, a junior pastor called, stepping towards her. Without a word, Shadi dropped the microphone and collapsed. Gasps echoed through the hall as the church was thrown into chaos. Ushers rushed to help revive her, but they were not successful. They lifted her limp body and carried her out of the church. Hours later, the devastating news was sent to the church's WhatsApp group. Shadi, the pastor's wife, had suffered a severe stroke. She survived but was confined to a wheelchair from that day onwards. 10 years later, God's First Son Ministries grew from a modest congregation to a mega church with branches across Nigeria. Every Sunday, thousands gathered to witness Pastor Nicholas' mind-blowing sermons and miraculous healings. Blind men regained their sight, the crippled walked, and those bound by spiritual oppression are liberated by the pastor with only one touch on their heads. The church became a beacon of hope for many and a place where the impossible became possible. But the miracles came at a cost. Members sold their land, businesses, and other assets to pay tithes and offerings, which helped Pastor Nicholas amass unimaginable wealth. This earned him a reputation as one of the richest pastors in the country. He owns a large convoy of luxury cars on different estates, which became symbols of divine blessing. Also, the congregation believed. Sunday services at the church is always filled with testimonies. One day, a man shared how he had faced numerous setbacks whenever he tried to achieve anything or move forward in his career. Since I joined this church, my life has turned around, he proclaimed, drawing thunderous applause from the congregation. Another man recounted how his wife, whom he accused of witchcraft, had tormented him for years. After meeting Pastor Nicholas, my ex-wife's evil powers were destroyed, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. Now she wanders the streets, mentally unstable. She is reaping what she sowed, he concluded, wiping a tear from his eyes. The congregation roared in approval, praising God for his judgments and justice. Moments later, Pastor Nicholas addressed the congregation. Who amongst you here has a burden they want lifted today? He asked in a very commanding yet soothing tone. A young man named Alabi stepped forward. Pastor, he began, have been jobless since graduating over 10 years ago, and no matter how hard I try, nothing is working out. I have submitted numerous applications to different companies, but none of them has ever gotten back to me. At this stage, you are the only one who can save me, Pastor. The pastor studied him closely before nodding. Your problem is not natural. Someone close to you is blocking your blessings. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the congregation. Tell me, is your mother still alive? Yes, Pastor, Alabi replied. How old is she? She just turned 80 a few months ago. Pastor Nicholas' expression darkened. Your mother is the one behind the struggles, he declared. Bring her to church next Sunday and we will break her hold over your life. The congregation applauded the pastor and the church service came to an end shortly after. The following Sunday, Alabi arrived with his frail elderly mother who walked slowly. Her face was lined with years of hardship. Unknown to them, Alabi's older sister Diola had followed them to the church. She tried to stop Alabi from stressing their old mother, but Alabi was already convinced that his mother was responsible for his predicament. She was surprised by her brother's insistence on taking their mother to see the pastor to enable him have his breakthrough. So, Diola decided to follow them. She wanted to see the pastor who could be bold enough to call her mother a witch. Diola sat quietly at the front row of the church with a heavy heart. Since she was a child, she had been gifted or cursed with the ability to see beyond the physical realm. She's always kept this to herself. Only her old mother knows about her ability to see beyond the ordinary. As she sat at the corner of the church, what she witnessed that day would forever change her life. What the congregation failed to realize was that Pastor Nicholas was not called by God. His rise to power was not divine but demonic, the result of a pact he made in desperation and greed years ago. Since he was a child, Nicholas had always been a gifted speaker who is able to move people with his words. He grew up in a small village where his parents, despite their best efforts, could barely provide for him. As an only child, he bore the brunt of their poverty, learning early in life that the world is not totally fair to those who are poor. After years of struggling to make ends meet through odd jobs, Nicholas found himself preaching in public places in Lagos, Nigeria. One fateful day, while delivering a sermon on repentance and salvation, a sharply dressed man called Sam handed him a card. "Call me," the man said with a smile. "I can help you take your preaching to the next level." Intrigued and desperate for a breakthrough, Nicholas called the number and Sam invited him to a secluded mansion on the outskirts of Lagos. There, Samuel introduced Nicholas to his father, a strong herbalist known for his dark powers. "This is your opportunity," Samuel said. "With my father's help, you can become one of the most powerful and prominent pastors in Nigeria." Nicholas, blinded by ambition, agreed without hesitation. The herbalist laid out the terms. The blood of 7 virgins will be sacrificed to grant you supernatural powers. Together, Samuel and Nicholas planned the kidnappings. Over the course of several weeks, they abducted 7 young girls, luring them with false promises of scholarships and jobs. In a chilling midnight ritual, the herbalist drained the blood of the virgins and used it to make Nicholas powerful. Their bodies were then buried underneath the foundation of the church he was about to establish. "The maggots from their rotting bodies will multiply, just as your congregation will grow," the herbalist declared. And so, God's first son ministries was born. Over the years, Nicholas' church flourished. The miracles he performed, including the healings, the prophecies, and deliverances, were all powered by the blood of the innocent. But there is need for constant renewal. Each year, the herbalist demanded a new sacrifice. The first ritual was the 7 virgins. The second was far more personal. It was his wife, Shadi, who had become the next victim. The herbalist required a spinal cord, and Nicholas could not refuse. One evening, while Shadi slept, Samuel visited their home. Nicholas watched in silence as Samuel performed the ritual, severing Shadi's spiritual connection to her body. The following day was the Sunday Shadi collapsed during the church's anniversary celebration. Although she survived, she was left paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Nicholas wept bitterly, but the power he gained from her sacrifice solidified his status as a godlike figure in the eyes of his congregation. 10 years later, the herbalist made another demand, the private part of an 80-year-old woman. Nicholas was horrified, but knew he could not refuse. Without the yearly sacrifice, his powers would wane and his church would crumble. So, when Alabi approached him with his complaints of unemployment, Nicholas saw an opportunity. He accused Alabi's elderly mother of being the source of his misfortune, convincing him to bring her to the church for deliverance when in truth she was the intended sacrifice. As the service began, Diola's spiritual sight activated. The scene before her transformed. A grotesque figure stood beside Pastor Nicholas. It was a woman with a half-human, half-wolf appearance. She held a glowing calabash in her clawed hands, and every time the pastor laid hands on a congregant, a thread of light emerged from their heads and disappeared into the calabash. Diola realized with horror that these were their destinies being taken away under the guise of being healed or receiving blessings. She turned her gaze to the congregation and gasped. Many of them appeared as strange creatures. Some had the faces of wolves, lions, or jaguars, while others resembled birds, goats, or antelopes. Though they moved and spoke like humans, their spiritual forms revealed their true nature. Diola's stomach churned as she watched women in black robes move slowly among the congregation. They carried bowls of dark liquid, sprinkling it on newcomers as they stepped into the church, making their illnesses vanish and their faces brightened with joy. But Diola saw the truth. The healing was temporary. Within 7 years, the ailment would return, and far worse than before. Those who left the church would face unending poverty and despair, and their destinies will remain damaged forever. As Deola tried to make sense of the terrifying revelations, the wolf-faced woman turned to her, fixing her gaze on Deola. In a voice that echoed both in the physical and spiritual realms, she said, "Speak of what you see and you will die." The creature raised the clawed hand to her lips, signaling to Deola to remain silent. Diola's heart pounded fast, fear gripping her. She looked at her brother and mother, scared of how to protect them and make sure they get home safe. She thought of how to save them without endangering her own life or theirs, but nothing came to her mind. She turned to Alabi, her voice trembling with urgency. "We need to leave now. Mama is not a witch. The pastor is lying to you." But Alabi refused. "Diola, you don't understand," he said, his face twisted with desperation. "I have suffered for too long. If this is what it takes to be free, so be it." Diola's heart broke. "He's going to kill her, Alabi. This has nothing to do with deliverance. You're walking Mama into a death trap." But Alabi eased and turned away, focusing his attention on the pastor. Pastor Nicholas stood before the congregation, his voice booming with authority. "Today, we break the chains of bondage holding this young man back. Mother, step forward and confess your sins," he said as he sprinkled an evil water on Alabi's aged mother. Alabi's mother, frail and surprised, shook her head. "I have done nothing wrong," she said softly as she began to sob. Nicholas ignored her protest, placing his hands on her head. He closed his eyes, chanting in a strange language. Suddenly, the ground beneath the altar began to tremble. The spirits of the 7 virgins emerged, their anguished cries echoing through the hall, but none of the church members saw any of this. Diola, watching, realized she had to act fast. Summoning every ounce of courage, she rose to her feet. "Stop this ritual," she shouted. The congregation turned in shock. Nicholas stared at her, his eyes glowing red. "You dare interrupt the work of God?" "This is not the work of God," Diola retorted. "You are a servant of darkness, stealing lives to maintain your power." The church erupted into chaos as Diola stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "I call on the true God to expose you," she declared, raising her hands in prayer. A blinding light filled the church as the ground beneath the altar split open, revealing the rotting bodies of the 7 virgins. The congregation screamed in horror as the demonic forms of Pastor Nicholas and Samuel were exposed. Nicholas fell to his knees. "Forgive me," he cried, but it was too late. The spirits of the virgins have risen from their graves surrounding him. You took our lives for your greed, one of them said. Now you will face eternal torment. The spirits dragged Nicholas and Samuel into the open shallow grave, which closed with a deafening roar. The congregation sat in stone silence, confusion and shock written all over them. Many wept, realizing they had been deceived. One by one, they left the church in silence. Diola comforted her mother and brother, assuring them that the true God had not abandoned them. She hugged them, guiding them out of the ruined church. Halabi, shaken by the revelations, begged for his mother's forgiveness. I was blinded by my pain, he said, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, Mama. His mother embraced him as she cried. She prayed for him and lectured him on the importance of patience and waiting for one's appointed time. Diola looked back at the church, now a total ruin. Though the battle was won, she knew the scars would remain. As the sun rose over the horizon, the three of them walked away, leaving the darkness behind. Over the next few months, God's First Son Ministries was dismantled. Former members sought genuine spiritual guidance, rebuilding their lives with faith and hard work. Diola became a beacon of hope, using her gift to guide others away from deception and towards truth. Although the scars of the past remained, the story of Pastor Nicholas served as a cautionary tale. Not all that glitters is gold, and true faith is found not in spectacle, but in humility and love. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed this video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.